Hello, hello, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I am your host, Nikki Anderson, and today is a first. We have two amazing podcast guests today, Loren and Kathryn. Hi, Loren and Kathryn.
Hi.
Super excited to have you both here and to experiment with this format. Who knows? I think we're going to have a good time, but we're going to be talking about an awesome topic. So we're going to dive into understanding customer behaviors and habits in end-to-end research. But before we dive into that, Kathryn, do you mind kicking off with a quick introduction on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having both of us. We're excited to be here. My name is Kathryn Ambroze, and I am a behavioral scientist / user research. I have a big focus in looking into consumer psychology and decision making. My background spans from I started out in the consulting space with applied consumer neuroscience. And in more recent years, I've moved over to JPMorgan Chase, where I got to meet the lovely Loren Flores. And we've worked together as user researchers.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you. Loren, do you mind also introducing yourself?
Of course. And as Kathryn said, thank you for having us. We're so excited. So my name's Loren Flores. I'm a user researcher at Chase. All of my background is from Chase as a whole. I did all of my learning. I moved careers within Chase and found user research. And I've been doing user research for 8 or 9 years now within multiple different areas across the bank. So lots of very specific digital financial experience, but lots and lots of experience of working at this large corporation.
That's so awesome. I feel like it's such a rare thing these days to meet somebody, especially a user researcher who has had their entire career or such a long stint at one organization. So that must be really cool.
It is definitely something that I'm always like, has it really been that long? And people are like, wow, amazing. You're that long? Really? And actually, it's been longer at Chase. But yes, 9 years as a user researcher, it's quite a long time.
Awesome. Okay. Let's get into our first question then. And Loren, I know you're gonna kick us off for this one, and then we'll just figure out how the conversation goes from there. But could you define for the audience, what does end-to-end research actually mean?
Yeah, so with end-to-end research, when at least how we've been using it, Kathryn and I, we are thinking about everything that the customer might be going through, the entire journey. So it's the entire experience is considered when we're looking at, maybe one feature or product that we're trying to work on at that time, but we're thinking about everything that goes into it, like the context of the user outside of the product or service, as well as what they might be doing right before coming into it, what they'll be doing within that experience, and what they're going to be doing after that experience. So pretty much everything.
Cool. That's really interesting. And I love the idea of including the context outside of the product, because I feel like that's not something that we think about all of the time because we're so hyper focused. Our product managers are coming to us, our stakeholders are coming to us with the context of the product and not outside of that. So I think it's such an important thing to consider and think about.
Exactly. And I think it's really important too to remember that when we are speaking to our stakeholders or people that are involved in the product or just even inherently working at a company, you're going to be biased in the fact that you are focused on this one sole thing for most of your day, whereas the user is not living their life thinking much about it at all. So considering that, and that when you make a product in a vacuum, it's simply not going to be as effective as if you have this context setting and you're able to really be able to understand where the customer is coming from, as well as where are they going after they're done with your little piece of the wider puzzle.
It's so interesting because we tend to get so sucked into things. It's like, this must be the center of our users' universe, why aren't they on our product every moment, thinking about it every moment like we are? But yeah, taking that step back, we're humans. We don't do things like that. We don't operate like that.
Within the corporation, I only have that experience working at a large corporation, but like I mentioned, I worked across multiple different areas. So when you have so many lines of businesses and products and product portfolios and offerings and services and all these different things. Everything is so siloed and like Kathryn said, looking at it in a vacuum. So it's really hard to kind of just get out of that tunnel vision mindset and think about it from the customer's perspective, which is what Kathryn and I are really trying to do a lot of the time. It's like trying to bring along our stakeholders, and especially if there's going to be multiple orgs or products involved, how do you bring about all of those stakeholders to really understand, like, look, like you are not the only product they're looking at. There's multiple products that they might be looking at, and they all mean one thing to them and not multiple products. So it's a really like tricky kind of relationship to figure out, and the balance of priorities. And there's just so many moving parts all the time.
Yeah, and I'm curious, when you are trying to take stakeholders on that journey and almost widen the scope of that mindset, what are some strategies that you've used to help them remember that, yeah, our users aren't in a vacuum staring at this one app for 24 hours a day?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it really depends on the makeup of the teams that you're working with, the people and the personalities as well, their priorities, what their goals are, things like that. But ultimately, like I think what I have found most successful is bringing everybody physically or virtually in the same place at the same time. We use a lot of Figma and FigJam to do different design thinking workshops or just brainstorms and things like that, where we get a lot of focus time to first let everybody kind of give their side of the story. This is what I want. This is what we're focused on. This is what I'm trying to achieve. And then once everybody has had a chance to hear that, what my goal is to typically try to say, like, okay, so that's great. Now here's the customer's point of view. Like, let's walk through what the customer now sees and see where those things overlap, where your priorities and their priorities and the customer's priorities and everything else goes together. And then one of the things we also do is we kind of create these briefs. We call them design rationales, where it basically documents all of that. It documents all the players, it documents all the players' goals, all the metrics, all of their whatever strategic priorities they are, the timelines, the people, and then we have like a vision statement that says it from the customer's perspective. That way, as the months go on, because it takes a very long time for these different projects to actually come to production, if there are questions or things need to pivot or change or anything along the way, we can go back to that design document and say, look, this was what our goal was at the beginning. This is our design, like, gold star. Is it still true? And it just kind of gets everybody back on the right track, back in the same mindset. Said we all agreed on this at the beginning. There was a reason for it. Are we still there? If not, what do we need to do to get back on track? And so there's just a lot of check-ins, a lot of like approvals-ish, like it's very corporate-y, but I think that's the most successful way, because otherwise you could go off and scope creep and go like a million different ways.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered, all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants? No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience. You can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants, and I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there.
I would complement what Loren was saying as well by mentioning that it's really important to make sure in these alignment conversations that we even just make sure at the very basics of just defining our terms, because everyone that's in different lines of business may refer to things differently. And especially at large corporations, people love acronyms, and different acronyms can mean different things to different people. And so just making sure that everybody's on the same page. And it also, in these conversations, allows people to have a bit more ownership on the project. And like Loren was mentioning, with having this brief, you're able to determine who's in charge of what, who's focusing on what, from what point of view. And by doing that, you're able to change from having oh, I need this to we need this as a collective. And that's where the vision statement really becomes effective.
Yeah, I love turning those I statements into more collaborative based statements, whether it's you and your teammates or your team and the users and the organization, because sometimes I feel like we can forget that we're all working towards the same thing. And it can become kind of difficult to remind people like we're all in this for like this bigger reason and all collaborating on this together. So
Yeah, and I get it too because like everyone has things that they're trying to reach for like their end of the year and like the bottom line, and it is a business, it's a big business, so I get it, but like we also are the ones advocating for the customers all the time, and that's really the person that's going to make the business thrive. So we're here and really just thinking like what would the customer want out of this?
And I'm curious for somebody who's maybe stuck in the weeds of really, really, really product focused, not a lot of that end-to-end context. Is there something that you might suggest to help them wiggle out of that place that they might be stuck?
I really like what something I actually just did recently was live account researching with IDIs. So typically what we have done a lot in the past is always working with prototypes, which is great. You can, do A/B concept testing and you can get an idea or quickly move ideas around based on feedback right away. But it's kind of limited in the fact that you just have this very linear get to A to B, and that's what the customer sees. They can't really explore around. So recently, what I think our product has really, really enjoyed observing was looking at live accounts. So we were able to actually do IDIs with the customer's live accounts. And when the customer is able to look at, their data with their information and a full production product, then they can get through all of the pain points that might be there. They can see all of the information that's available, not just what was created within the prototype. And with the product being able to actually observe a customer in the wild, essentially, they were like having so many of these aha moments that I think are really going to stick with them. So that's something that I've done just recently that I'm pretty excited that the product was able to come along with.
Kathryn, do you also have anything that you've tried recently that might help somebody out, like broaden that scope in their minds?
Yeah, I mean, along with what Loren was saying, I think that's a really great segue into just talking about the idea of using like understanding habit loops and things along those lines, because by addressing what a customer's habit loop looks like, you're able to have a better understanding of their context, and just having it in that live account makes it even realer and brings you closer to what an actual environment might look like. And it's not artificial in any sense of the word, because it is their account, it is their information that they're looking at. And so it just brings the stakeholders closer, but it also brings you closer to a customer's true experience. And so you're able to have, the stakes are higher when they are looking at their own account number, for example. And so one thing that I've found very valuable in these conversations, even just in prepping for discussions with live accounts, or if you're doing some type of a retro afterwards, is building empathy maps, because it allows you to understand, what they're saying, doing, thinking, feeling. And in doing that, it really humanizes the user at the end of the day. It humanizes the person into being not just a customer, but it's an everyday person that's living out their lives, with kids and dogs and, complications. The messiness is where the opportunity is for us to better fit into their lifestyle.
I love that. That was such a powerful one-liner. And I'm wondering if we could dive a little bit more into like, how do you define habit loops? Like what do they mean, in case this might be a new thing for the audience? What are habit loops in user research?
Absolutely. So I typically like to go off of Charles Dugan's approach to habit loops, which is, you have a cue, routine, or reward. But very simply, a habit loop is really just this idea of a pattern that's being established in a customer's life that is repeated throughout their daily lives. And it's really just how people live out their daily lives. There's routines built out in every day, like every aspect of our lives. And so by using that framework, we're able to have a better understanding of where do the products fit into the customers' lives, as opposed to the other way around, where we, so often fall into the mindset, like we were saying earlier, that the product is the center of the customer's world, because that's just simply not the case.
I love that. And Loren, are you also using habit loops as well in your work?
That is something that we are looking into a little bit more recently because, just as I mentioned, some of the things that we're learning from these live accounts research is like the customers are explicitly telling us that you're not going to change my behavior. Like, pretty much in those words, like that offer is not going to change our behavior because it's too far out of my way or it's not meeting me where I currently am. And I just, in this day and age, don't have the mental capacity to do anything differently than what I'm doing right now. So that is definitely something that we're seeing more and more, and that we're trying to get a better understanding of the different mindsets that are out there. And I'm currently working on trying to define exactly what are some of those like regular jobs and then the mindsets of the customers doing those jobs.
I would just add too that customers' habits are what influence their behaviors. And so it's really important to keep that in mind, because if there is, something very simply like you have a cue as something as simple as you leave your gym bag right by the door as you're heading out the door. If that's not there, then if you're missing that cue, you want to make sure that you make it to the gym. Like ultimately, that's the routine that you're trying to continue doing. And so by making sure that you account for these different cues that people have in their everyday lives, like I said, we're better able to integrate ourselves into what the customer has already established, because it's much harder to try to literally recreate the wheel and try to establish new habits compared to trying to fit into an already existing habit and improve upon an existing habit or make it easier.
Right. And that super resonates. It's actually research that I'm working on right now. It's like people are so not into changing behavior. Like they are in their ways. And I think a lot of organizations come in thinking that they can change behavior, or they can, you know, kind of force themselves into somebody's routine or habit. And it's something that I've seen a lot of organizations try and do and quite frankly fail at.
Yeah. And one thing that I like to call out too, I always use this analogy when I'm talking to stakeholders that, if our goal is to fit seamlessly into the customer's life, to fit into the user's life, but you also don't want to stand out for anything negative. I often refer to it as nobody appreciates breathing or air until you have a cold. And so it's you want to make sure that you are like fitting into the customer's world and you're not sticking out because of something negative in a space like finance or health. It's really important that you don't have this negative connotation. If anything, you want to be the status quo and be working behind the scenes so that you don't necessarily stand out to the customer in a negative way, because that could be the worst thing for them, is to, if there is some type of incoherence that is existing in their habit loop, that's when it's going to come to their attention and it's going to bring their awareness that, let's say there's a certain cookie that they like and the cookie didn't taste right when they went to go pick it up. They're like, oh, this isn't what I'm looking for. And so you're not meeting their needs. And so that's what we're trying to stray from when you're considering these habit loops. You want to be able to satisfy their needs, and then true innovation comes out when you do break that coherence level, but in a positive direction. And that's not really necessary all the time. Like, you don't need to be called out all the time by the customer. You just need to be able to do what they need, essentially.
Some of the impacts that can act like real impacts can a large corporation, like the customer could be a little bit bothered by something, or they could not want to recommend that product to their friends or family, or they don't want to use that product anymore. They might opt for a competitor, or they might need to contact support, which costs the company a lot of money. Like, there's so many ripple effects to just having this small potentially incoherence, and which is why we really need to think about the entire thing as a whole and make sure that we smooth out any of those bumps in the road so that doesn't cause like even bigger issues down the line.
Hey everyone, I have been taking some business courses recently and I am launching a new membership that's all about how user researchers can become more business savvy, more strategic, and more of a business partner in their organizations. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, hey, my organization isn't really mature. It has like a low user research maturity level. Please do not let the maturity of your organization dictate your user research career. That's what I did. Because I was in a lower user research maturity, I kind of let myself stagnate and I didn't really learn new things. And with that, my skills kind of like deteriorated. I lost a lot of time that I could have used to learn really, really important skills because they weren't necessarily applicable to my organization at that time. But guess what? I got fired. And then it didn't really matter what maturity level my organization was at because I was no longer there. And I wished that I had taken the time to learn some of these skills because they would have been applicable at the next places that I went into. I know that it can be hard sometimes and frustrating when you're in a low maturity organization and you want to push things, you want to learn new things, but please, please, please don't let your current organization and their levels of maturity impact your future career because I promise you, you will not be there forever and you will need the skills that you need to learn in the future. Promise, 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 especially with the user research industry changing and us hopefully moving into that more strategic space and operating more as business partners and innovation partners to our organizations. Also, if you want more details on my membership and how to become a little bit more business oriented as a researcher, check out the link that I have and I hope that helps.
Innovation really comes from just remaining relevant to the customer. And like it really goes back to the basics of relevancy, because if you really go off the beaten path, I always like to say, you can have the greatest innovation in the world, but if the customer doesn't know it exists, what's the point of it? And so it's really similar to that too. You want to make sure that it's something that somebody's going to use. Like, why put all this time, resource, and energy into something if ultimately the customer is not going to acknowledge it? So it's really, again, keeping that customer at the center of everything that we're doing.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of times, specifically like on Reddit. I love Reddit for social listening. I think Reddit is just hilarious and also just full of interesting information. I've seen a lot of times on Reddit, it's like, oh, they've updated it and this version sucks because some company was trying to be innovative or do something, but they've, as you said, Kathryn, stood out in a negative way. Yeah. And it's just so fascinating to watch people do that. Whereas, a lot of really great products don't get huge accolades, nor do they get negative reviews because they're just there. They seamlessly exist.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it's funny, just recently I was on my phone and I'm seeing all of these things pop up. Like I'm on social media and everyone's talking about this update that Apple did where it changes the way that pictures are laid out.
Yes.
And people are appalled and they're all trying to, like, I'm seeing all these things being like, how to get it back to what it was. Like everything's all over. And it's one of those things where maybe don't fix something that's not broken. Like you're sticking out to the customer that so much so that they're finding workarounds to go back to what they've already established as working perfectly fine and fitting into their typical routines.
Apple needs some research. Amazing. And so I'm curious, because we're very swiftly approaching the end of our time, if somebody wanted to apply this concept of end-to-end research and also habit loops at a corporation or at an organization that they're working at, what are some steps that they could take to start this kind of initiative and maybe what I would think about potentially as a mindset shift?
I mean, I think a lot of the time, my first thought is always journey map or blueprint, service design blueprint. So as much as they're tedious and potentially like there's a million different ways you could do one of those, it is really good just to get that out on paper and out of your head and out of what you think it is, and then take it to all the different stakeholders that might have a part and say, this is what I've mapped. Is that correct? And they'll say, yeah, that's great. Or they'll say, well, you completely forgot about this entire piece over here. And then you just keep building off of that. And then from there, you could take it to the customer, not the actual journey map itself, but then you can go to the customer and start asking them about what they do. And then based off of their answers, you can build that layer onto the journey map as well. And then obviously the next step is to figure out where all the gaps and pain points are. It's just kind of like a never ending thing. But I always like to start there, even if it's something really, really, really light. It doesn't have to be big to begin with. You can take it piece by piece and it'll slowly grow into probably a monstrous thing.
Yeah, I would also add that, especially in corporate settings, I like to lighten the mood a little bit and try to insert some fun and play into what we do because nothing is that serious. So, what I always find fun, and I did recently, is like a role playing activity where I created a script and it was specifically trying to, again, I started by saying, just think about your own life and how you interact with products and what you do. And all of the different hats that you wear as a parent or as a friend or as a sibling. And then I transitioned that into, okay, well, now think about what it's like to be a business owner. And I actually had people go through this script. And during the script, I included sound effects. So they would be at their child's baseball game. And then all of a sudden they're getting a call from Costco that their shipment didn't come in and blah, blah. And just all these interruptions. And the goal of all of these distractions really is to remind the stakeholders that customers are doing a million different things at once. And while they're doing a million different things at once, they're also interacting with your product potentially. So they have to be able to do something without truly thinking about it, because in situations when you're in research using a prototype, you have them in this environment that they are solely focused on this one activity that you're presenting to them. And when it's out in the real world, there are a million fire drills going on in the background that have to be accounted for to make sure that what we're presenting is really going to be seamless and easy for the customer.
I think a really good example of the reason why that's important is because when they are focused on it, yes, they say that they like this, they like that, they do that. But what I hear all the time is, "Oh, I want to know about this via email." And they're like, "Yes, I'll definitely check my email, but we have the open rates." And that's not the case. So they say it, that is like the number one, but yeah, so it's really important to just try to figure out what they're actually doing. Don't take their word as gold. Like, they are saying things with the best intentions, but that's not necessarily what happens all the time.
Yeah, I always say that usability testing labs in particular are a user research like fantasy world. Like, they are just like so not aligned with real world at all. And yeah, you've created the best environment for user research, but in doing that, we've completely stripped away the intricacies and nuances and distractions of day-to-day life. And as you said, Loren, the best intention, they're saying it with that in that moment because there's not all these other things interrupting them. And they're like, yeah, then maybe that would be nice. And then they get into the real world and that's not so nice.
Exactly.
It's hilarious how we've created stuff like that in the attempt to understand people. But we got to do something, I guess. And so I'm curious from each of you, I would love to hear one piece of wisdom or actionable advice that you would like to share with the audience based on our conversation today. And Kathryn, do you mind going first?
Sure. Actionable advice. I feel like throughout this conversation, we had a lot of discussions around habit loops and end-to-end research. And I just want to call out that I just want to, I guess I'd say, re-emphasize the importance, like I brought up in the beginning, transitioning something from an I statement to a we statement, really building that partnership, because especially with something with end-to-end research and then making it even bigger by saying, well, now we have to consider context and we have to consider the habit loop. We want people to be invested in this and to understand that their piece of the puzzle that they're looking at is important to us. And by investing in the overall, we will help their one little piece. Like, by keeping in mind that if they are focused on something that maybe is not directly related to what another line of business is working on, but if the overall experience is better, like, you've won at that point. You want to make sure that the customer is having a good experience. And I think people often get caught in these silos where they have the siloed thinking. And so I would just really recommend having those conversations with the stakeholders up front about how everybody is important, everybody is like, we're trying to reach that vision statement. We're trying to move forward in a way that will best suit the customer.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you. Loren, any
And
wisdom?
yeah, kind of in the same vein. I mean, as researchers, we know like always start the day with the customer. That's the only thing we're ever thinking about. So I like to remind people that as well. And again, like having that physical document that has everybody's approvals and sign-offs and everything that they agreed upon after getting in that room together is something that I think, while might be a lot upfront, it will save you a lot of time and effort down the line, especially when in a large corporation, we're constantly trying to tell other people what we're doing and why and all that kind of stuff. So it's just great resource that we all said, like, this is what we're doing and why. We all agreed on it, and here's the evidence, and we don't have to think about it anymore because as everybody else, we're also thinking about a million different things. So just having that physical piece of evidence of why you're doing what you're doing is really helpful.
Awesome. Oh, that's amazing. Those are perfect. Two perfect places to end today. Kathryn and Loren, thank you so much for coming on. It was filled with awesome nuggets of information that I'm sure the audience is going to take away, and super actionable stuff. So I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been fun. Time flew by.
It really did.
I know it always does. I'm always like, wow, I could literally sit here for like another like hour to 2 hours and just chat. Amazing. Well, I also just want to thank the listeners very quickly. Thank you all so much for your time and for tuning in today. And I look forward to talking to you soon.